Good evening. You're listening live to the Extreme Movie Show. I'm your host, Rob, broadcast to you live from the Pine Hills Palace just west of Orlando, Florida, and from the great Midwest. Usually with me on Tuesday nights, I have RDV. And of course, I have the young 20-something also from the Central Florida area. Pixel the Barbarian has decided to join us tonight. And for him, it's actually the first watch of the movie we're going to be discussing tonight, 1982's Conan the Barbarian with Arnold Schwarzenegger, the movie that catapulted him to instant stardom. Not Pumping Iron, not Hercules Goes to New York or any of that other crap. This made him a major action star and kind of set the tone for what would happen in action films for the next 10 to 20 years almost. Is by far, in my opinion, one of the best movies of the 80s. It's certainly better than anything that's come out since in terms of these sort of Sandahl movies that we've been doing, some of the B-level ones recently. Gore comes to mind. But I have to sit there and say, guys, for me, this is an all-timer. It's great. And the reason why is this. The way you do a movie, I've always said, is you got to be interested in the characters. And that's where stuff like Lord of the Rings recently fails. And despite the beautiful settings, I still prefer less CGI and more authentic stuff. And here in Conan, you've got filmmaking 101 from the beginning by one of the best directors of all time. I want to give a special shout out to DVD Daddy, who tweeted out some retweeting, getting some people to join us tonight to listen. I think that's nice of a thing to do. It's very well appreciated. A lot of people are tweeting about all the goats that are involved in here, because I will tell you this. I've often said in RDV, I'll hand it over to you in a moment for your initial take on this film. You and I normally do action movies, and we say we're 80s action based, right? We talk about the canon classics from the 80s, and we just dive into everything else, right? I've often said, and you may know more than I, that's why I'll hand it to you here in a moment. I've always said Blade, to me, was by far the best movie that come out of Marvel or DC or any of those types of movies with Wesley Snipes. Much better than, of course, Wonder Woman or the Avengers or Thor or any of the other stuff. I know that's blasphemy for a lot of the younger listeners here on the Extreme Movie Show, but for me, that's what I believe. But Conan is number one. And I just think that this is the way you do a film. It's something you can watch. There's not a lot of dialogue. You get what's going on. And it's a very philosophical movie. Obviously, Oliver Stone had a big hand in it. John Milius did some interesting documentaries on him. But this is the way you make a movie. And I just couldn't stop watching. It's one of those ones that when you put it on, you just cannot stop. It's up there with like Rocky to me, when how good this movie is. And so to me, I wasn't sure what to expect on rewatching Conan, whether or not it was going to stand up or whatever. And it just makes me want more of this, because these movies don't get made anymore at all. I love this film. I think it's fantastic. And I can't wait to dive deep into it with both you guys. So what's your initial take, RDV?
I'm going to say that this is my second time watching. I watched it a while back, and I loved it back then. And just rewatching it again, it just reminded me of how just awesome this movie is. I don't think there's a better sword fighting movie out there today. People will say, well, I like Crawl. I'm like, well, you can like Crawl for certain things, but Conan basically was a comic book adaptation.
Yes.
They actually took it serious. They put money into it. They actually, you know what? When someone gets their head chopped off, it falls down, it bounces, or the blood on the sword. Like, they actually took it serious. Because we watched like movies like Gore, where there's a little bit on the sword, but there's nothing else. You don't see anything. They put the location, the effort, everything, as far as when he finds his sword, and that as he's being chased by the wolves, just everything. Just like, I forgot that he actually speak. I thought he spoke like one or two lines. He spoke quite a bit, more than I thought I remembered it. But
definitely as the movie goes on, yeah.
But no, the whole cast, the supporting cast is great in this. The scene with the witch, just everything about this movie just screams manlyhood. This is basically what every boy who was watching this in 1982 when it came out, teenager, you want to grab up a sword and just start fighting.
And I think if nothing more, it's the hero's journey in a way. Yes. You're confronted by all these trials. I mean, nothing's horrific as what it is. You're interested in seeing what's happened, and the character grows on you literally as the movie progresses.
I mean, you have an evil wizard, and you have a strong with a sword. You got the beautiful babe. You got the guy who's the thief who has the crossbow. It's your D&D thing, man.
Yeah, but this movie's not for kids. I mean,
it's not for kids. And the fact that those who are watching this, who have been reading the Conan the Barbarian comic books over at Marvel by Roy Thomas, I think Roy Thomas was writing it. I'm not sure. Ed might know, but no, yeah, to see this, something faithfully adapted from like Robert E. Howard's in Marvel comic books, and just seen on the screen, holy crap, there was nothing people could play about. Oh, this movie is a woman he forced himself on her. It's there was none of that crap. They put the movie out, and those who wanted to see it went and watched it. And like I said, I think it was perfect length for the movie. Everything about this, even the score, the directing, and the acting was great in this.
Yeah, I agree with you totally. It's going to be interesting here in a moment when we start from the very opening scene to start talking about some of the themes that really pop up a lot. Because I think if you look at the movie that way, it gives you a different perspective that maybe you haven't had a take on it, especially if you haven't seen it in a while, or it's a movie that's new to you. Now, generationally speaking, Pixel, you and I cover things. We've recently covered Twin Peaks, and we currently do the James Bond movies on a monthly one. Which, by the way, October is Moonraker month. Just FYI, everybody. I'm looking forward to that.
Space Nazis.
Well, anyway, I mean, there's things when we talk about things historically, but Pixel, again, you're the young 20-something here, and so it's interesting because this was a first watch for you, and so your whole baseline of films is absolutely nothing like what mine is, or maybe the slight crossover area that RDV represents, being in his mid-30s. So for you, as a first take, what was your overall vibes and impressions of this film?
I was surprised. There's more nudity in here than gore. There's no nudity in gore. It has big busty bikini babes and all that. No, okay. Well, that's the surprise. But that aside, no, it's a very, very good film. There's a lot to draw you in. It was initially slow on the uptake, but after it went ahead and started getting somewhere past that beginning, I feel like it finally did start to pick up some. Honestly, I feel like I wasn't sure how I'd feel about it, but it truly is. When we said last week that this is probably the best of the sword and sorcery type films, yes, absolutely. I can definitely see that. I haven't seen enough to be completely sure, but from what I have seen, yes, it definitely goes up there.
Yeah, and I think that that's something that gets lost over time is that there's some movies in the 80s that weren't considered very good, and now they're considered classics. And this is a movie that just made everybody kind of notice, hey, who's this guy who looks the part? Because I will tell you, and Pixel, you'll relate to this. When we talk about James Bond movies, we have our formats. We have the opening gambit. We have the stunt scene. We know if there's skiing in a Bond film, it's going to be a great Bond film. Especially like the stunt in The Spy Who Loved Me, where the guy literally does it, where he skis off the cliff and gets the Union Jack on it. Phenomenal opening, one of the best natural stunts ever caught on film, in my opinion, even to this day. So when we see someone like Arnold, who, despite the controversy around him, coming out of retirement like 5 years later and winning Mr. Olympia or whatever it was in 1980, 81-ish, okay, he looks the role. And, of course, the movie starts out with this wonderful philosophical thing that I think sets the tone for the whole film. And this is what a lot of movies, I think, today don't do well at all. You get, obviously, this incredible score, which is one of the best scores, like I said, in movies. It's one of my workout music scores that I have in there. It gets me fired up. But you get exactly everything that's happening in this film here. And, RDV, I'll swing back to here in a moment. You and I always talked about how there's not necessarily a lot of wholesomeness or familyness issues in movies today that are dealt with positively. And I love the fact that we see the family looking very serious, not smiling, and doing their work together as a family unit. And yes, it's in fire. You could argue it's symbolic. Conan's being raised in fire and he's going to have to do whatever. But when you see the etching by hand going on at the hilt of the sword and being created there, and the wife then, doing the hand with it. Yeah. It's so good, and this woman is so gorgeous to me. I know I put her out here into the thumbnail instead of Conan because she was kind of like a one-off. But the father and son sitting there having a discussion about what matters most in life, which is self-reliance.
Yeah,
it's not men, it's not whatever.
Don't trust men. Don't trust women.
Don't trust beasts.
Yeah, beasts. Trust steel. It's your only friend.
Yeah, meaning the hand that wields it, which is the riddle of steel, which, when you're younger, like, oh, is that a secret technique? How can I level up my sword fighting game, right? It's not. But we see everybody in the small, tiny little village at work, and it's snowing out. And this is filmed, I think, in Spain, big chunks of it. I'm not sure if this part was. The guy who's the scout who runs up, who's jacked as fuck, I believe that's Franco Columbo, who's big buddies with Arnold. And that's one thing I have to say about this film. I'm instantly terrified and peeing my pants as a 10-year-old kid watching this because these guys are huge. They're massive. They're not smiling. And they're not doing 50 million flippity flop stuff. You've got legitimate snow and you've got the thump of the riders coming in. And then they just absolutely massacre this town and probably some of the best horse type stunts we have, even with the wife running underneath the horse trying to get to safety. It's nothing major, but that's real time with a horse moving through, and they just absolutely slaughter everybody. And it's a way to get you caught into the film immediately with action without any of the crap that goes on in today's films, which is usually some sort of stupid PC sort of thing here too. So what did you think about this opening?
Well, for me, when they show the actual horses, like, galloping stuff, the camera work. They tell someone who's actually on the camera, riding a horse next to them, trying to film back. So you get that authentic, going up and down. It's not where someone's just going with the camera. No, they're actually like moving with the horses and stuff. So that was pretty good. I like that. But the thing is, this movie basically ruined it for me. Is anytime I see a village like this, where all I was happy that they're getting raided.
Absolutely. And you see how defenseless they can be, even if they're immediately at arms, right?
And that's the thing, that's like, you have Mako doing he's doing the whole narrating over this the whole entire time, the introduction, which really fits the whole entire movie, because you're like, he's almost his master, I'm thinking like, is this like a little kid talking about? We've seen this before. Max, the Road Warrior, the little kid was actually the old man new to narrating. Mm-hmm. So I was like, oh, it's Mako. The wizard guy he meets later on. But this opening's, yes, traditional as far as the setting goes, the costumes, everything down to the steel, the intricates, everything was basically taking into, they did the research. They took their time and put the effort into this movie. We've seen movies like this before, we'll do like gore, for example. The cheapest, lowest budget movie, and they really didn't put much effort into it. We reviewed the Barbarian Queen last week, and actually no, it was Tuesday. Mm-hmm. And you saw how that was a little bit better than gore. They put a little more effort into that, even though it's probably around the same budget. So when it came to this movie was, I believe, it was before gore, actually, in '82. Mm-hmm. And this opening. And I disagree. I don't think it's slow. I think it's purposely set that way, and it's the time you need. This movie needed to be 2 hours so you get the whole entire story in. If they would have rushed the beginning, I don't think it would have been as entertaining. The whole point of it being slow, and I agree, it wasn't slow, but it was done on purpose so you absorb the scenery, absorb everything, so you take time to appreciate it.
Yeah, it's brutal, it's violent, it's ugly, it's life in a nutshell here too. And then of course, here comes Thulsa Doom, and then of course, here comes Pixel the Barbarian, because Pixel, this ain't your average comic book movie here at all with this kind of opening. I mean, did this seem different to you, or how did you feel about all this?
I mean, I would put them in different veins. They aren't the same. I mean, but. No, I mean, it goes ahead, it sets itself up. I did think initially it was slow, but it was fine. I honestly preferred once the boy was in slavery and he became Arnold Schwarzenegger. That was when everything sort of picked up.
Yeah, I mean, we get a brief little bit of James Earl Jones, who's fantastic in this role, and his voice is natural. Beheading Conan's mom with his dad's sword. What a bastard already. Oh, yeah. But he does it. He just achieves full maximum heat without having to, resort to shitting on the town that your sports team's from, right? I mean, this is how you do it. And the people around him are like ex-bodybuilders and stuff. Mm-hmm. So everybody's jacked, and it's like they look like they know what's coming when you're watching them in the background. They're not happy. There's no bloodlust, maniacal, low-level goobers here, what like that. This is serious business. And the last thing you see is the kid looking at the standard, the symbol of the snakes, before he does go in slavery, which is a cool scene too.
Yeah, the whole slavery thing. I mean, it was awesome as far. I'm not pro slavery, but in this movie, it works well as far as explaining how Conan got the determination. He was determined to survive, to get revenge. You know, and I love the fact, as they show, he starts with little kids, and then it shows they're teenagers. You don't have to show the face. All you show is the feet because they're pushing this wheel around, obviously for some kind of mining. I'm guessing, or something. I'm not sure. They didn't really explain what that's for, but yeah, and then we get to basically it's just Arnold Schwarzenegger by himself, and then so we get to see like, holy crap, is this guy just like jacked? Just like, he's the only one pushing. The guy who was originally the kid, the guard that was sitting at him when he was basically whipping him when he was a kid, telling him like get moving. I believe he's the one that takes him as a slave, his master. He's the one that treats him on the fight, right? He's the one that basically buys him. I started talking about because they're both ginger, the kid.
Yeah, and the guy that shows up and takes them to fight, yeah, he's the one. He does the one that does release them later. Yeah.
So and just their whole bond between those two guys, he didn't beat him. He actually took him. He got him educated. Took him to the Far East lands. He had him train with the samurais and stuff like that. And you get to see Conan learning how to use the sword. And there's comedy throughout this, which I love. It's subtle comedy. There isn't a lot, but there is some. And like I said, everything was written perfectly well. And I'm pretty sure they adapted a lot of this after Robert E. Howard stuff, because Robert E. Howard's, if you read his works, the Conan stuff is awesome.
It's an interesting bit here because this is obviously him becoming an adult. Pixel, you'd mentioned, this is when you start picking up for you. What I like too is that if you ignore the part about him, learning how to fight and all that, the voiceover work is the philosophical part, talking about how he finds his self-worth, where he just understands that he didn't care about living and dying, that here we are, I can do awesome. Something. Yeah. And so I think that's how it is for an adult. So if you find your sense of worth or purpose, then you're in a position where things matter and decisions get made. And so it's kind of neat that ideal is so obviously put forth in this movie, because again, it's a hero's journey, but it's a slave, dang it, that ends up being a king, and we're just seeing the beginning part of it. Yeah. And to me, one of the interesting scenes too, I thought I had to laugh, was watching, I'd forgotten about the scene, but when he's becoming educated, where he's learning to read and all that, the comment was made that he was even bred to the finest stock, and they just bring a woman in there and he comforts her in the beds or whatever like that, like he's meat, because he is a slave. And that's the whole point that you get with this movie. Yes, there's raiders. Yes, there's violence. It's brutal. It's over. It's effective. This is how the world really was until you got slavery kind of eliminated and you had civilization and all that too. And it's taken a long time. But this is the norm rather than the exception, like it's been for a few thousand years.
I'm glad they didn't turn him into a total savage. Everything that's been a title Marvel, they've had Savage Conan. No, he was a slave. He's given this woman, and all these guys are going, we're going to watch her. Let's go. Like, they're basically watching two horses going to have sex. They're breeding, because they're treating them like animals. So I love the fact that he takes the time and actually he puts his fur over her, draper to shield her from other people's eyes.
Yes.
And, it shows that he's still got morals, even though we saw him before the scene. We saw him in the pits just going crazy. He's got the arm bracelet with the spears on the hands, and he's got the claws. It's just like, wow, that is a side of Arnold I forgot that he had, because we always see Arnold doing the comedy stuff, the action movies, but the brutal stuff, I was like, oh man, I would have loved to have more of this. I mean, obviously we'll talk about the sequel another time, but it's brutal, and I like the fact, like I said, I love swords and sorcery stuff in this. When you actually, he's a barbarian, they're supposed to be brutal. If you write a barbarian story where he's just kind of like a nice guy and doesn't do anything, he's not savage, it kind of ruins it for me, because it doesn't seem believable. And this movie seemed believable.
Yeah, danger's around, with anybody, with any weapon. You don't know what's going to happen. And, Pixel, one of the things too about this movie, you mentioned, I think off stage, that you're surprised at the amount of nudity that was in here. And I've said, well, there was definitely a lot of it in the 70s and 80s films, thankfully. And I don't think it's done distastefully here. But when the the whole Genghis Khan stuff about, crushing your enemies, driving them for you, Lamentations of Women, all that's where that comes from. Okay, that's cute. That's the line everybody remembers. But Pixel, being a young guy, I wondered if this particular scene, which I think is one of the most powerful ones, is when his captor realizes this guy's unique, he's special, he's an outlier, I'm going to set him free. And it's like the biggest thing that he could do in Conan's life, period. and he does it, and then it chases on. And I think for you, this is the picture I got, was that this is when you really start liking it, when it became part of the adventure part of the movie rather than the setup. What was your take on this segment here of the movie?
I mean, yeah, no, I mean, when we're talking about the brutality of the world, him being recognized as something special and then going ahead and being able to meet his side characters and going on from there, that is really the meat of it for me, getting to an actual goal in mind. And obviously, you need the brutality there to go ahead and set up who the character is. But no, I mean, yeah, no. Yeah, what y'all said and more.
No, so before he frees the guy, beating the witch, we get the green screen, some added CG, some spirit stuff. Here she's like, basically bites him at a time. He's like, okay, I guess, whatever, and her little hut turns out to be like the size of a TARDIS at the inside of it. It's crazy. But no, she starts crawling around like a tiger and stuff, and she's talking about how he's the one that's rumored to do this, and he's kind of like, okay, he's just in there drinking, and she starts, basically wants to have sex with him. So he's like, okay, I guess, whatever, because he's not that bright, he is to the point, but
she said there's a price.
Yes. So he basically has sex with her, and then she goes all like kind of like snake or something face on her face, and she starts biting him in his neck. I'm thinking like, oh, he's dead. And he throws her he just yeets her into the fire. But then he's like, okay, I guess that's it. But then she starts throwing these like light, I guess like magic bolts, or you see the everything in the candles getting sparking everywhere, and this like it was like, wow, for the sorcery. I gotta say the CG in this movie was, for being 1982, was actually kind of cool. It kind of reminded me of the Raiders of the Lost Ark when you saw when they opened the Ark. So
the fact that you mentioned Raiders, I want to bring that up real quick here for a second, because the quick scene here before, for some reason, reminds me of Raiders, and it's the scene where he's running, and he literally and figuratively sheds himself of his shackles when he finds the old emperor's tomb or king's tomb there, and all those German shepherds are chasing him, the wild rabid dogs, and he goes through the hole there. And I just, for some reason, think this is one of the best. I don't know how to describe it, so I'll just say it like this: cavernous Raiders of the Ark type scenes, because everyone loves the opening gambit with Raiders, right? Throw me the whip, the idol, and the sand, and the and all that stuff. But it's cute and it's good and it's still fun to watch. But there's just something more atmospheric about this to me, and I don't know why, other than maybe most of it's probably real. With the props on it, I just feel like I'm in that cave while he's doing it. He's lighting the fire and everything.
Yeah.
And the witch, oh my God, as a kid, that was the most erotic things. Unless you were a fan of Rachel Ward or somebody that had a husky voice, you had no idea women would speak like this. And don't you want to warm yourself with my fire? I mean, come on. I mean, it's pure innuendo at its best. And this woman's, geez, I mean, my God, men can only say no so often, right? I mean, and Arnold doesn't kind of want to, but it's interesting she knows about him, and of course she's a witch, right?
Yeah. So the cave scene you're talking about, he's being chased the wolves as he's been freed by his master. He wanders and he finds this little rocks, and he's being chased with wolves. He goes in, he follows through, he falls in the cave. He realizes it's like a grave site, and that's where he gets his sword. So after he does the fire and gets this, I'm thinking okay, what's going to happen next? Next thing you see him walking, and he's wearing the wolf pelts.
Yeah.
I was just like, he's like, you know what? It makes sense that he's able to, do, I guess, make the pelt stuff, because his village, I'm sure he watched his parents and his mom, do that stuff. So now it's been a lot. It's been many years. So, and he was very young when he was taken. He was probably like 5 or 6. He had to been. I don't think he's that old. But
it's about 4 or 5 years old, because he mentions it a little later in the film about how long it's been.
So, even this, later, there's little things about Conan I love it. Even his friend, when his lover dies, his friend says, Mako's asking him, Mako or Mako, whatever you want to call it, Ed, I've always heard it pronounced Mako. And he basically says, his friend says to him, he's like, Mako's like, why does he cry? He's like, well, I'm crying for him. He's a barbarian. They don't cry, and Like that just makes him even more manly.
That's your bromance part to it.
But no, the whole thing, you brought up the thing that he freed this guy. And that's the thing he could do, because he was set free, so he returned the favor to somebody else who was basically a slave. Being let, he could have let him there die, but he's a moral guy. It just adds to his character. And like I said, he brings them along, and then you see they're eating the food. They get a campfire and talk about their guys. He's like, Conan's like, my god is Crom, he laughs at your god, your wind god, he's like, well, and the guy's like, my god's like, he's this guy, all that guy you see, he's stronger than you. He's like, bah, whatever. It's like, so I love the friendship, the companionship in this, so the sense of danger, the blood and guts, man, people being decapitated, people getting their heads knocked in the very beginning with a hammer.
Yeah.
Well, with that, no, the moral center of Conan the Barbarian is a large part of him as a character, and so with him in this movie, with him that way, it does go into my favorite part of the movie after he goes ahead and meets Valeria and all that, and he gets dragged before the king. That is my favorite part, where he's pretty much given riches right then and there. And he says, I don't care about any of this. The king just wants his daughter back. And while Valeria is telling Conan, let's just go. Let's take what we have, live. Conan, no, he goes out on his own because he doesn't believe they'll follow. So he goes ahead and goes for the princess himself. And it's a powerful part. Right there was that moment where like, okay, this is good.
He wasn't up the president. I believe he was going because he saw the guy, the snake guy.
Yeah, and so we skipped over a scene that I want to touch on too. After the witch scene, when he meets Subotai, you see them, like you were saying, RDV, about them kind of just bonding him and them running across the plains to the music playing. But they're going to a couple towns and all that. And what I love about the town stuff is you just get a few snippets, but it makes you feel like an adventure's going on, because you've got like a bunch of dirty people in the background with like 60 pigs moving around and all that. It's not clean and pretty like Game of Thrones, right? I mean, it's gritty, it's gutty, it's disgusting. It's what a town like that looks like. But you have them trying to steal this jewel from this snake pit, and this whole scene here with Subotai and him, it works perfectly. And I love the fact that there's no talking. It's where he gets it, and so is able to get some wealth, so then the king's people around him went up too, like what Pixel was saying here. But he sees a symbol in there. But even like you and I have RDV, we've harped on this a lot, especially like using Chuck Norris movies as an example. We like the fact that you do most of your own stunts and stuff. You actually have real rats moving around in the background. Here, of course, the way it's shot, you've got a mechanical snake, and so it's not a real one. But the scale of it and all that looks so much better. And I'd rather have stuff like that than CGI. I just would. And it's amazing what
props.
It's amazing what the blue light on them when he's fucking the witch, what it looks like. And here, when he goes to take the eye and it's red, and they get the reddish light. And on here, you mentioned the weapons earlier, RDV. I'll just say this: the way the props were, there was blood bags filled with like slaughterhouse blood in it already. So when you would hit, they would explode, or they could like be in your weapons. So like when you would like use your sword, more blood would come out. So a lot of this is authentic blood for the most part, and it's just cool. I just love it. It seems like it was a difficult thing to do.
And this thing, all the prompts in here have their own purpose. The sword at the beginning, his father's sword, the symbol he grabs off the temple, he brings it with him later on, and that's what causes him to get captured and beat. Because he's trying to pose as a priest. Arnold, we get to see Arnold.
That was great.
That was hilarious. He grabs flowers from the wizard. I was like, "What are flowers for?" Oh, it's for a lady. It's like, okay, whatever. The next thing you know, he's going to like where they're gonna have the huge cult thing for James Earl Jones' character, Kulan Gath, is it?
Thulsa Doom.
Tulsa, sorry. I get confused with Red Sonja all the time because those
Thulsa Doom. Yeah, it's James Earl Jones.
So anyway, basically Tulsa Doom has this whole cult thing and all. They're all dressed in white, and they're recruiting. So this little town. So he stays there. Everyone's got the flower and stuff, and then he's sitting there. The priest he talks to the priest. He's like, I'm a little shy. Can we go talk over here? I'm thinking, is this priest gonna hit on him? Either way, the priest basically they go outside. Where he's like, Conan's like, you know, I'm a little shy. Can we go talk over here? I'm thinking, is this priest gonna hit on him? Either way, the priest basically they go outside. Where he's like, Conan's like, can we go somewhere where no one can see us? I'm thinking like, you never do that because first of all, this is a barbarian. Yeah, he ends up knocking him out, stealing the guy's clothes, and he tries to pose as as the priest walks up to the temple thing. You see this giant and that's the thing too. This whole set here was great too, because even we see that twice in the movie. The first time where he ends up getting captured, and then later on when he goes back to by himself to get revenge.
He's a bit of a dope walking around carrying this jade symbol around and showing it to all the guards, though. I mean, how much more dumb can you be?
I'm like thinking wait, that's the one it's always been, because I wouldn't. First of all, you're showing that he's trying to say he's authentic, but I'm thinking he didn't think about it. Maybe they're gonna notice that it was stolen, or maybe no one's allowed to have that because it's such a holy thing. You're not supposed to. He didn't think about that, but that's what led him to go. And they got the two. Let's talk about the two right hand men for Thulsa Doom. Yeah,
we did see a scene right here before that where, of course, we meet Mako as the wizard, and of course this will come to some play, and he's kind of by himself because he doesn't want to be by other people, and you get hints of some of the history being set up, like with the witch knowing who he is, and of course the narration talking about my master, so we know he's going to survive to the end. But also here where you have this graveyard, this cemetery of kings and warriors, kind of like a Valhalla thing that gets mentioned in here, where fire's not supposed to burn or whatever. It's setting up for something you're going to see a little bit later on too. But I gotta say, Pixel, you and I talked a lot about when we just got through doing the prisoner episodes. Most of them have been released right now on the Xtreme Movie Show here.
Yeah.
And I mentioned a lot about the history of what was going on with communism at the time and the wars in our world, and how certain themes and elements like that were into the show with the village and Big Brother watching and all that. So what did you think of the cult stuff, Pixel? Because those are based off of hippies from the 60s that kind of, some people think that's where all this sort of stuff started from. But what did you take of all this setup? Was this goofy to you, or did you like it at this point?
No, you can't go wrong with, you can go wrong with cults. Let's be honest. You can go very wrong with cults. It's very
Everybody
easy
loves
to go
a cult
wrong with
though,
cults.
right?
But there are fantasy cults. They're a basic enemy to go ahead and set up. When I play D&D, you can't have a game without at least one kind of cult there. So with the snake cult, that's as good as any. And I loved Thulsa Doom's eyes when it revealed that they had slits. It was awesome. And you were right when you were talking about the giant snake. And there's actually one more very good effect that I loved when they had the guy transforming into a snake later.
Yeah.
All those elements to worship this snake god. It's awesome. No, it's at its core, just a core fantasy mechanic to go ahead and use.
Thulsa Doom, though, being the wizard he obviously tell he's immortal because he's bathing the blood of virgins. He must be, because the guy didn't age at all since Conan was very little. And once Conan gets caught, he even said, he's like, you killed my mother and my father, and I've killed a lot of people and stuff, it's it'd be more specific. But it's always in a way, I'm your father then. You survived this long because of me. You owe everything to me.
Yeah,
so
it's the classic, broken home issues. You're looking for a daddy or a mommy.
And I love the fact that James Earl Jones, being the wizard, thought he has the power to hypnotism, just like snakes. Snakes are known to hypnotize their prey with their eyes and their tongue and stuff. So even because we show first example is when he did this to Conan's mother, and then he chops her head off. It's with the sword. I was just like, and he's just sitting there, and we basically glanced over that scene, but that their opening scene though, when Conan's a little kid,
yep,
and she's still holding where the hand was, the body just fell over, and he kind of looks at his hand, it's like, oh my, and he doesn't say anything, doesn't cry.
Yeah,
it's like all these little moments like that. It's just like
it adds up.
It shows you. It's like, wow, it's awesome. I love it. When you have someone who's just so relentlessly evil and tries to pass it, he's like, oh wait. So basically, now I recognize you. It's like you're, oh yeah, that was back when I was obsessed with getting was collecting steel and stuff, and now I realized human power humans is more to value. "You here? Come here, dear." On the cliff, she jumps off the cliff and kills herself willingly. Like he has that power. He prefers that. And it's like, so what better is that with the power of flesh and the hand to control it? You know, It's just like,
she jumps down. That's awesome.
You know, it's like that's just pure power, pure self. You know, this is pure fascist, pure this like crazy evil. It's like, so like I said, when Thulsa Doom bites the dust at the end, it makes it much more satisfying because now this evil scourge is gone. You know, but the scene where, because they basically Conan after this, you know, they beat him and they left them to like on the tree of woe. And
it's a literal, turning into a god if you want to at this point.
Yeah.
There's the symbolism is just so obvious, and I've said, recently when we were reviewing our fall stuff to watch that you and I were talking about recently, RDV, I mentioned that in the movie Fall with the two girls climbing a tower, yes, it was absurd, but I thought it was done well. I said that was the second best vulture scene ever, because this one is the first, where he's on the tree and the one's pecking at him and he eats it. Oh, this is great. This is awesome.
Because he has one eye closed and he opens up and he's like, bites her with the neck and he's I'm like, is he that thirsty? He's just trying to drink the blood at first. I'm thinking, like, is he that, or is he just killing because he's like trying to keep
disease flesh and they're picking away at it? Yeah.
But eventually he's sitting there and he looks up in the mirage. He sees his friend Mr.
Subotai.
Subotai. Yeah, I can't remember what his name is. It's a weird name. And he starts laughing because he thinks it's a mirage because he doesn't see him, because he goes out and then he comes back up. Obviously he's brought back towards the wizard and basically, and what's her name? His lover, Valeria. She's like, "I'll pay any cost, whatever. Save him." And he's like, "Well, okay, we'll do this." He wraps him up in the cloud, the shroud, puts the tattoos over his face and stuff. And then so they're gonna come for my night. It's like, and like I'm like, why is he tied down? But then you see like the spirits coming coming down, and the whole sky is just, there's lightning. There's like just like the skies are blood red and stuff. The high winds, and they're just trying to hold him down as the spirits are basically, and she's just swinging her sword and trying to stab him. And you see, like, these actually look like demons. Like, it was just, anyone else, any other movie, this would have been like, this is very hokey. But like, like this was actually legit horrible. Horrifying.
Now, Pixel, I was going to say, you cover the Lord of the Rings series on your own channel, which is, at the end we'll plug that here. And I know you're a fan of the series, and obviously I am not. I obviously concede the fact that it's a very beautiful, almost too perfect looking, and I know they shoot a lot of stuff in New Zealand like they did with the films. But I thought that maybe when you saw this, you would be like a lot of people going, "Oh, come on, that's what they call CGI. That's a joke. That's horrible looking." I mean, did this make or break anything for you in terms of the quality of it?
Are you kidding? No, this is great. No, the demons in this, I wasn't expecting them to go ahead, and with how they were reacting to them, it flowed perfectly. So I like it, especially for the 80s, to go ahead and blend that way. It was a perfect mix. No,
the wizard cowering in his hut.
Huh?
Wizard cowering in his hut too, while they're out there.
Yeah. Well, while they're trying to keep Conan down, because they're wanting to drag him away, but no, they're fighting off these demons. That's great. That's core stuff right there. No.
As we have it being mentioned in chat, before we continue on towards the end of the movie here, I want to bring up Valeria, because obviously we talked about Arnold and everybody else kind of looking the role. And of course, RDV mentioned the snake stuff and made me think of when they were going through the first scene there too, where the lady that sacrifices herself does the snake thing and she falls, and that's when they know, because she lands and she screams she didn't get eaten by the snake. But Valeria, this lady, was it Sandahl Bergman or whatever her name is, the actress.
Bergman,
she is a dancer. Has been in stuff before, all that jazz she was known for, which is a big film back then in I think the late 70s. A lot of people I think back then said she's my standard, she's my status when it comes to being a tough female character or whatever. And of course we get like Ripley and Aliens and all that, and a bunch of them in the 80s too that we actually talk about. But take a moment, Pixel. I'm gonna put you on the spot here. It's probably not fair of me doing this, and that's why I'm doing it. Give me a brief compare and contrast Valeria as a standard versus, say, Lord of the Rings, Galadriel.
No. Oh God. Listen, just because I am able to enjoy
This is the
something-
extreme part of the show
Let-
right now.
Listen. I have said multiple times the worst part of that show is Galadriel. Galadriel is a terrible, terrible part. I don't even think it's really fair to go ahead and bring that up, especially when we're talking about something that's, a little closer to Earth than, say, Lord of the Rings, which is high fantasy compared to the sword and sorcery kind of movies that we've been watching. But with that, no, it's not the same at all. It's jeez.
Well, with the resurrection and rebirth of Conan here, if you want to argue that, we're going to go through my favorite scene of all, which is the extended action sequence called the orgy scene with phenomenal music and everything else there too. But Pixel, take us through it first, please.
Through the orgy?
Yep.
Is it really orgy if the guys are wearing shorts and wearing masks?
Yeah. Listen,
that's standard stuff. It's an orgy.
It's an orgy, and
they're eating human body parts. I mean, this is phenomenal. Come on.
It was
tons of red lighting.
It was the attempt of an orgy.
It's not supposed to be Caligula, and it's not supposed to detract from what's going on.
Yes, I know.
They're supposed to know their pleasure in themselves.
Listen, when they're going in, when they're actually going in, and you can actually see, I wanted that face. I wanted Arnold's face whenever he was looking at it, like, oh. But no, that's pretty much what Thulsa Doom goes ahead and does. Like, he is watching from above, and he has his slave princess right there who's totally addicted to him, just right there on the side. And he's watching. He doesn't want any of that. He feasts off of the sin, the debauchery of it all down below. And while you go ahead and have his sidekick right there saying, oh, this is paradise. It's not meant to be obviously it's meant to be grand to see, but it's not something to be praised, because this is all a part of their de-evolution into animalistic beings. It's a very powerful scene. It's quite powerful.
Did you catch the woman when she's getting to slap the girl when they brought it in, and then she gets a ball, and she starts chewing on a hand?
Yeah, that's awesome. And you got the
I was not expecting. I was like, well, that's a lot of dry ice. I'm like, wait, there's something in there. Oh, it's a hand.
Hand, a skull, all that. Yeah.
Later on.
But the way this is shot, and one of the reasons why it's my favorite scene too, is okay, let's talk about the orgy. When you go, oh my God, it's an orgy. Of course, porn is so widely available now to everybody at any age, on any device. It wasn't like that back in the early 80s.
No.
So when you would see like a boob shot or a butt shot, and when you're a kid, you tell your friends, oh, when I saw this movie about a half hour in, that's just how it was. And it's kind of lame and juvenile. Here, yes, they're supposed to be having an orgy, but you don't need to see a bunch of boobs and schlongs and butts and all that too. You get what's going on, and that's what's important to the scene. But the way it's shot in here, there's so many great moments that you could just pause it, and they're very like great shots that you could go, oh, this must have been concept artwork, because we get them going through the caves, and then we get the music starting to build up. We see them serving in that, like you said, the dry ice soup or whatever, and that giant cauldron being set up. Well, of course, we're going to know what's going to happen to that cauldron here in a moment. But because everyone's just doing what they do and eating human flesh, like, that's disgusting, but it's erotic because they're, having sex. And you got the leopard who's calmly watching Thulsa Doom with King Osric's daughter, who they've been hired to go get. She's literally at his feet. That's a great shot with James Earl Jones. And yes, it's a mechanical type thing, but watching him transform into the snake is friggin' badass. It's up there with American Werewolf in London. I mean, to me, it's great looking, right?
I couldn't remember. It's like he's going through this little escape hatch. I'm like, is he gonna come around and bite someone in the back? Like,
it did look like that's what was going to happen. Like, he was going to come up from there and go ahead.
I'm like, that's Subotai, whatever name is gonna die.
Subotai.
Sorry.
Subotai. and Valeria, when they split off here, the Alpha, Bravo, Charlie teams, solo teams to do what they're gonna do. The
Now-
way she moves, I think, is incredible because obviously she's a dancer. She's fluid by nature, very athletic, familiar with her body, and she's tall too. She's almost a 6 footer. She's legit probably as tall as Arnold is. Arnold's not as tall as what everybody thinks. He's no 6'2", 6'3".
Now,
Um,
I guess I like the whole part when they're putting on the commando paint.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
That does bring me though to one of my favorite mechanics, and I wish that this. Okay, the snake arrows are cool. They're very, very cool.
It's badass.
However, whenever they go ahead and they stab through, that's when they should have started moving. You know.
Well, this isn't the first time I've actually seen this before. I've seen this actually done in animes where too. It's like I don't know what if Conan's when I created the trope
the
or
extreme anime show, Bankman.
no, I'm just saying how Conan has basically affected other properties because I'm sure they saw this, they watched this, they're like, you know what, that's kind of cool with the snakes, you know?
Yeah.
And
Agreed.
it, obviously, Hot Shots took the chicken to the next level, but you guys are glancing over an awesome scene. Conan fighting against the guy with the sledgehammer, and the guy.
Oh no, we were just getting up to that point because the music's
Yeah.
nice and it's building and everyone's yelling and screaming. There's a lot of chaos. They're hacking people. We're getting beheadings. We're getting all this blood
Yeah.
splatter everywhere. It's phenomenal.
We'll call them hammer and sword.
And then
because they don't have names.
it stops for a second, and the guy walks in and he's like, kill him, and then he's like, you, and then they play the main theme or whatever like that. And I mean, if you're not like, you know, Boner City right here as a guy, I don't know what you're feeling, but
So
this
Conan's
is it.
Yeah, and it's funny. Like, it's a totally different fight because this time Conan's ready. Before he wasn't. He was caught off guard. So when the guy swings a hammer, he hits a pillar where the slave girl was attached to. Well, she's probably now crushed now.
Yeah.
But yeah, because like it falls over. He's like, and the guy kind of. I look at the guy's face. The guy swinging the hammer. He's like, oh crap, he's gonna kill me now because I ruined his temple. But Conan uses because they told him before they went to rescue Prince. He said, "This is about getting the girl out and getting done. We leave. This is about revenge." So Conan uses that when the guy knocks the thing over to make it look like he got crushed, but actually he snuck out. He left.
Yeah.
So, but with all this, I think that the next part, the losing of Valeria, that I know you already touched on it, Bankman. I think that's a core part of.
I didn't touch on it.
Paid for his revival.
I wish I touched on it. Oh, I'm sorry.
Oh, geez. But no, with that, and then the burial, quote unquote, they light a fire.
Viking funeral.
Yeah.
Yes,
In the graveyard.
We'll go ahead. When
When
you have that and you have like the wizard there saying, "Oh yeah, that's not going to work. You can't have a fire up there. We blow it out." And it happens. It comes to and it consumes the warrior. It's great. It's fantastic.
And it comes back to the guy. My God is the wind god. The winds
Yep.
allowed the flames go because he said a little prayer. So it's
Yep.
like I said, everything that happens in this movie has a reason.
Yep. And then when he has his prayer as they prepare this final battle, as it were, I think that's great too. And it's what
You don't, yeah. He always jokes about how I pray to my God, but he never listens. You know, it's like he's like Crom. He's like, well, I know you're a fighting God. You love fights and all, like, you know, protect me. But if you don't, guess what?
to hell with you.
To hell with you, because what everyone's gonna remember is two guys or few versus many. It's like, you know, they'll remember. Yeah, it's like so. And I love this whole scene because it's so. I'm like thinking like we've seen this before where people they put up dummies. You know, they can look at their bigger army. Yep. And the guy has the arrows wrapped around. They got all the stakes. My only point with this whole entire fight scene at the end is that nobody gets impaled on the spears.
Yeah,
but there's a few tremendous horse tumble sequences where they end up rolling through all that stuff. I'm looking at that going, there's no way people would do that in a movie today.
Dude, Conan clearly took off a horse's leg, but it got up and ran away.
Yes. Yes. Now, just after Thulsa Doom with the snake arrow going, now they will see why they're afraid of the night. And then he shoots it off. I'm ready for this. I'm fired up. I want to see this.
The two giant battle axes, and like he throws one, and I got another one here. I'm fine.
Then he holds, and I believe that I'm correct here. He fights the man who holds his father's sword, and it breaks, shatters. He holds it. He looks at it, and the fight is over. The fight's done, but there's still Thulsa Doom to be dealt with, and he goes ahead with the princess watching, and he is able to take down Thulsa Doom, and he completes his mission.
Okay, let's not rush, okay? Because this is an awesome ending. Thulsa Doom, before he leaves, he thinks he's going to kill the princess. And that's not Conan. It's the other guy, like Tabuti, whatever you want to call him.
Subotai,
whatever. I don't care. His name's not important.
Oklahoma.
He's not important because all we're focusing on is Arnold and Thulsa Doom at this point. No, but he comes, like the guy, the archer comes in and he basically blocks with a shield, blocks the snake, and then so later on we get to see another ceremony going on as far as the whole thing. Conan's got the sword, but he's kind of snaking his way up towards. It's pitch black, and there's 1,000 of people in white robes and hoods. I'm thinking, ooh, this would not fly today. But it is such a great thing. I mean, how many people are probably like, hey, do you want to be an extra in this movie? Sure, because they had tons of people. They had at least 100 people there in the crowd holding candles. And so Conan sneaks up behind the guy, and James Earl Jones is like, basically, it's like, oh, it's you. It's like, you're alive. He's like, well, you can't kill me. I'm your father. It's like, and he does this whole hypnotism into Conan, where Conan's kind of like this, but then Conan's like, fuck this, stabs him in the neck, and then starts chopping his head off, and then holds his head. But this is the best part of the whole entire movie.
Yes.
He tosses the head, and you hear it bounce off the steps. I'm like, oh, that sounds horrible, because I don't know what a body sounds like when it falls off steps, but
meaty.
That was just chunky, just bouncing off. And then he just, he kind of just stands there for a while. Everybody's like, they're like, oh my gosh, and then they basically start throwing their candles in a small little lagoon. Now, they didn't think about this because the whole entire little lagoon there's like so many people with candles. Those candles would just pile on top and then they'd stay lit. They wouldn't. But regardless, we see a shot of him on the steps there, and he's just kind of pondering. They're all kind of, you see one by one the scene, and they're all just kind of dropping their candles, and they fade. It gets darker. He goes on, he grabs one of the
sensors,
not sensors, but it's a bowl, pit of fire, oil in it. He swings it. This will get this, one last epic scene. He throws it. And he just throws it back onto the perfect hits. I want bloopers. Where's the behind the scenes? They better be behind the scenes. I want to see him throwing it and oh crap, I missed again. But it goes up and it lights this whole which I thought was marble, but it turns out it's just fire because the whole thing just burns. And you see as they zoom up, and the whole thing is just on fire. The whole thing. My only complaint with this ending is him showing it's oh, later on he adventures this and he's all king. I'm like, I don't want King Conan. I don't want that.
That's where he ends up. So it's a future thing. It's to go ahead.
I know. So I don't think they're planning on doing a sequel at this point. Maybe I'm wrong, but yeah. Then they did Conan Destroyer after this a few years later.
Well, the one scene towards
I agree, and I agree with quickly. I would say Verity. I love that scene. He just takes more than one blow. That's just chopping the head off with the blunt, that broken sword. That is awesome. That's. Out of everything that happened in the movie, that's my favorite part too. I have so many favorite parts. I don't know which one to choose. I just love it.
Well, the one scene when they were having the big battle there at the wizard compound there in the old graveyard, and Pixel, you'd mentioned before with the guy that had his father's sword, because it was a great sword. Was what we saw being forged at the beginning. Conan obviously gets a visit from Valeria from Valhalla, apparently, or whatever, because she momentarily blocks his death blow on Conan and stuns him.
She's a Valkyrie now.
So, I mean,
do you want to live forever?
Yeah, I mean, that's kind of the whole thing too. And ever since then, I was disappointed in Conan the Destroyer. I love me some Wilt Chamberlain, but the movie was a mess. If they treated it seriously and let these guys do it, would have been fantastic. And originally, they were going to do a whole bunch of them, kind of James Bondish, and it never turned out. I don't know if the 80s could have handled a serious movie like this, a second or third one. The answer is no, really. And they haven't been able to since, because there's been talk about them relaunching. I know Jason Momoa did.
Jason Momoa was not that great.
No, and there was talk about them doing King Conan, actually, and I always think of this scene here at the end with, as a kid, I always thought, God, when I'm older and Arnold's a lot older, to see him as a king, as long as he's physically able to do it, I would love to do it. This is before Terminator. This is before he got huge.
Yeah.
And here we are now, 40 years later, literally talking about, he's still around. He's still acting. He's had a rich life. I would love it if he would be able to do a King Conan type movie and it wasn't run by a bunch of 20, 30, 40-year-olds that don't know what the hell they're doing, which is what most of the movies are these days. Because, again, if you guys don't know John Milius and Oliver Stone, what they've done, almost all their stuff's just fantastic. It's intense, it's gritty, it's gutty, it's extreme. It's not for everybody. It really isn't. This is not a feel-good type movie that got super popular in the 80s that everybody loved to go see, whether it was crap or not. Didn't matter. That was the thing about the 80s. You had some optimism after the first few years, and some of the dark stuff or serious stuff like this just got put to the side, literally, because of what was going on culturally. And that's an influence that we cannot, act like it didn't exist back then. And living through it, I can tell you that Conan was one of those movies everybody talked like, man, did you see this? Holy crap,
Yeah.
It was intense. And that's the one word about it. And that's lacking in a lot of movies today too. But overall, great film.
And I agree. No one could do this unless it was actually Arnold had full control of it. Because look at Stallone. Originally, his last Rambo movie was great because he had control over it.
Well, okay, but that's different. Stallone is a filmmaker. I don't think Arnie would.
No, I'm just saying Arnold would probably wanted. Now I don't know Arnold, but I'm assuming he'd want it to be not crazy and just funny and comedy and stuff. He'd want it to be as serious. Keep the tone of the movie. Otherwise, unless he hates Conan the Barbarian, as far as I know, I don't think he does. I mean, I know he loves the Terminator movies. He loves the science fiction stuff, explosions. He loves that stuff. But like I said, even with him on there, I mean, who knows? Maybe it could, but I wouldn't trust it today because look at how they treat everything. If you show, they would never show any the Barbarian stuff. As far as I hate rape is horrible. And it's just moral, but it happened in the Barbarian movies. It happened in this movie. They would never do that again in a movie because, it's just a vile thing. We don't need to promote that. Too many people are triggered by it. They would never do it. And that's the thing. We were too busy catering to the people who would never see this movie than the people who actually want the movie.
Yeah, and the thing with Arnold too is obviously being from Austria and the way he grew up, things are a little bit different. And he's been a big movie action star. He's done comedy, he's done politics and all that too. You never really know with somebody what's changed in their life other than the fact that he's older and obviously it's not a money issue or whatever. And I'm sure he wants to still be relevant and do what he loves to do. But if you don't have something that's really going to be great, kick ass, then I don't see him wanting to do it. Unfortunately, we've seen what's happened say the Terminator franchise over a very long period of time. It's like, why bother? And so if a real King Conan's not going to be made, I don't want it to be made. I just don't want the movie to be.
Do you know?
Okay.
They probably do. Conan, if they did a King Conan, they'd have Conan versus Evil Son. That's what we'd get. That's the type of movie we'd probably get.
No, we'd get Conan and his daughter rising to his throne as a warrior woman. That's what they would do.
Don't go that dark, bro.
That's what they do. It's what they do. And
Amazon,
and that story alone wouldn't be bad, but it's what they would do with it that would make it bad. And
my only complaint though is that Sandahl Bergman didn't get her own prequel series called Valeria.
I wouldn't need that.
No, back then it would have been great. I disagree, bro.
Back then in the 80s? Are you kidding me?
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean,
Barbarian, it actually was an entertaining movie. I don't care what anybody says. Oh, it looks hokey. No, it actually was an entertaining movie. Warrior Princess started off as doing pretty good. Yes, eventually, my problem is that two people get involved in this, and people decide we got to cater to this, we can't do that. Back in the 80s, they didn't give a shit. They did it. That's the difference between people who are in charge of everything today.
Well, I think the number one rule of movies, and we'll go around with our closing thoughts here, is that number one, it's to make money. Let's be honest. It's a product.
True. Yep.
Number two, to me, the artistic part to it from the non-business side of it is it's got to be entertaining. Doesn't mean it has to give you a message. It doesn't mean it has to teach you a lesson. It's not like that at all. I mean, it can do that, but it doesn't have to. But as long as it's entertaining, and you can have something as dopey as, say, Ace Ventura, which I always reference how I love it, but we're watching it for the physical comedy of Jim Carrey. We're not watching it for the plot. It doesn't have to have a message. But even a movie like that wouldn't be made today. But overall, I think that's where things get it wrong now. They're too busy trying to set up season 2, season 3 of whatever, trying to force everything down to you and forgetting from the get-go, grab the audience's attention. Don't say what the new norm is today, which I keep hearing everywhere online and from people talking stuff at the office and all that too. Well, if you just give it a couple episodes, then it really starts to click. Like no, I haven't watched thousands of hours of TV movies and reading over my long, rich history life where I can't tell if something's going to be good or crap within 10 minutes, because you usually can't. Let's be honest. So anybody that says that's pretty much, I think, an excuse to really in for something that's not even really worth watching. And with Conan, you get that opening gambit. The score is just tremendous. I guess back then as a kid, it was so different than anything. Certainly better than E.T. by miles. I just wondered how it was going to fare up, and after reviewing it with you guys, I can definitely resoundingly say it's still one of the best movies of the 80s to me. Still one of the best, if not the best, sword sorcery movie of all time, and probably the best adaptation of any sort of comic book and everything else. And Blade's like a number 2 to me. Everything else is probably way off in the distance. But yeah, you guys, if you haven't seen it, you got to watch it. You got to check it out. I know many of you all have here in chat. That's awesome. Let some friends of yours know about it too. It's a phenomenal thing to do. Yep. That's one of why we do what we do here on Xtreme Movie Show. So RDV, let's go for your final thoughts, and then we'll go to Pixel.
Final thoughts is quickly want to point out what Verity said. About Valeria actress, Sandahl Bergman being the evil queen of Red Sonja movie, which came out like a few years later after this movie.
Right.
That's kind of crazy. I guess she wanted to do more stuff, But no, if you really enjoyed this movie, you like Conan stuff, check out the early 70s Marvel Conan the Barbarian stuff. King Conan was originally the title turned into. But also the new comics they have by Blaze Comics, it's called the Cimmerian. It is solely based off L. Robert E. Howard, the original creator of Conan the Barbarian stuff. It's all works, and it has everything you'd see in this movie: the nudity, him being the same spirit as Arnold. The only thing that I fault them is they don't draw him looking like Arnold. But it is awesome, and like I said, like those are like usually like little 4-issue miniseries, but they're great. They're cheap. So that being said, if you haven't watched this movie, you are missing out. Don't be a prude. Watch Arnold's in this. I love Arnold in Terminator. I love Arnold in some of the movies, but I still think this is Arnold's best movie. Not because he doesn't talk, it's because I think he really acts more. He's more of a serious role.
Me too. I mean, that's well said. And a lot of people forget with Arnold, they think of, consider the divorce and all these stupid lines and all that stuff. And that was the thing of some of the action movies. But this is the Arnold that I've always loved and enjoyed. And you could argue that while he's had some great, entertaining, fun films since then, this I still think was his best to me by far. I don't even think it's close. And Pixel, as we go to you for final thoughts, I'll just throw this out there. This is why I get outraged whenever I see anything on TV or movies, whether it's CGI or DC or Marvel or whatever like that. I can't stand seeing 150-pound people kick ass at everybody and all that too. Not when I'm used to seeing jacked up guys, wielding very heavy instruments like that, and people that are, lifelong bodybuilders. I just can't buy the lack of physicality in today's roles with stuff where it just bugs the shit out of me more than anything. It's ridiculous, and that's one of the reasons why I can't accept a lot of stuff that's being made today. That being said, I'm done ranting, but you're the guy that has the most freshest view of this since it's your first watch, and you're also the youngest, so it's probably going to be a bit different than ours, which is fine and okay. So I'm curious to think, after discussing all this, what you have to say to wrap things up.
Well, I just can't believe that Venkman thinks this is Arnold's best movie when Kindergarten Cop exists. Cinematic masterpiece.
If you want,
jokes aside,
I understand. Okay, but I will give you this. So, Kindergarten Cop is probably his best. Well, no, hold on. I'll go with Eraser.
My final thoughts on this, it was definitely good. It's definitely worth a watch. If you haven't watched it, you should. And short, simple, sweet. There we go.
Yeah, and it's, like I say, we've covered it a lot. It's a great film. It's one that been on our short list for quite some time. Excalibur was mentioned earlier too. We're transitioning to doing a bit more fallish Halloween theme type stuff for the month of October. Not necessarily everything, but a lot of it too. So be looking forward to that. Probably be looking at doing Monster Squad, maybe some others. On the short list, guys, I will just say The Invitation I thought was horrible. It's crap. It's garbage. Don't bother. But it's done in a very rich, manner, but it's a boring piece of crap. I've seen better stuff like Say
You
Children
know
of the
what?
Corn.
I think next Sunday with Pixel, you're here next Sunday, right?
Probably.
Of course he is.
Destroyer. We'll follow it up.
Well, what about Red Sonja? No, I'd rather do Red Sonja.
We all would
To
have
be
better do
determined
it,
at this
Sonia.
Point. Might as well. We did this. We might as well do Red Sonja. So.
Well, there you go, guys. Conan the Barbarian 1982. Go check it out. It's definitely on everybody's short list. We have several of the videos when we first launched the Extreme Movie Show, top 10 movies of each of the decades that some of us did. We always like to go back and revisit them once in a blue moon, and especially if you guys are kind of foaming at the mouth for particular movies. So it'll be interesting to see what kind of comes up. Be on the lookout for some other new stuff that we're going to be dropping here soon.
If you haven't done so, click like, subscribe if you haven't done so, and share this out. And if you can, if you're watching this on the replay, leave a comment down below in the comment section. Helps out the algorithm, helps share out the channel.
Yeah. Also, if you would, as you heard, I review Rings of Power. If you want to hear some thoughts about it over there, check out Pixel Lore, just spelled like pixel and lore. Yeah. I also review House of the Dragon. That's good too, but it's better.
All right, guys, thanks for watching. Thanks for listening and showing up tonight. As always, have a good night, and remember, stay extreme.
All right.
Good night.
And if you don't